What's up guys, Kudo-kun here. So Fire Emblem Warriors has been out for about a week, I've been playing it for about a week, and I want to talk about it today. I beat the story mode pretty much the weekend that the game came out, but I wanted to take some time to go through the history mode and do some of the side quests and that kind of thing, so I could really give a detailed explanation on how I feel about the game. First though, can we talk about how awesome the cards in the special edition to this thing were? This has nothing to do with the game, but god dang. These things were nice. Before we get too deep into Fire Emblem Warriors, I want to explain Warriors games to people who were maybe really into Fire Emblem, but are on the fence about getting this game because they aren't really into the Warriors franchise or they've never really played the Warriors franchise. If you've heard about the series, but you haven't actually played a Warriors game for yourself, then you've probably heard that they're mindless button mashers. Most of the people who say they're mindless button mashers are people who either played on the easier settings or they took a whole lot longer on a map than they needed to because they didn't really understand what they were doing with the objectives. They were just sort of mashing buttons and killing dudes. So I'm going to explain how Warriors games really work so you can go into this and fully enjoy the experience. There will normally be two different colors on the map. There will be blue areas and red areas, and they both exert pressure on areas around them that aren't their color. So in this example, because red owns most of the map, red is exerting its influence near the blue areas to make sure that blue can't expand. This is how 99% of your games are going to start in Fire Emblem Warriors because this is how Warriors games go. So your job in these situations is to take over the places on the map where your opponent is exerting the most pressure. For the most part, this is going to be going to those red squares and taking them over by killing the fort's captain, or it's going to be going along the sides and taking out the spawn points and the enemy generals. A lot of people think you just play the game by running from fort to fort, but that's not really the case, especially on the higher difficulties, because you not only need the forts, but you also need the roads connecting the forts to be taken over as well, so that enemies don't spawn in and start trying to take over your forts while you're out trying to take other forts, because it can get kind of annoying. So it's splitting your time between taking influential points, taking smaller points, and defending your bigger points so that your opponent can't take them over and make you redo them. Yeah, the combat is pretty button mashy, but the actual game part of a Warriors game is finding out how to manipulate the map. You want blue to expand as quickly as possible while keeping red's influence as small as possible. Learning how to do this is what makes Warriors games fun and makes them replayable. I'm impressed by some of the things they were able to carry over from the Fire Emblems games to keep it fresh, the main thing being the weapon triangle. So the character you're playing as will now have an advantage or a disadvantage against certain enemy types depending on what kind of character you're playing as. Making a team that can work around this weapons triangle and keeping your options diverse is one of the things that keeps the game feeling a bit fresh. Another cool carryover is the support system. You can have one character team up with another character to give the character you're playing as certain stat boosts. You can also use team attacks that let your teammate come out and deal some damage. This is very useful because if you are a sword user, for example, then you can have an axe user in the back. Then if you happen to come across somebody who is weak to axe damage, you can bring them out real quick and you can start wailing on them. Your ultimate attack, known as a Mushu attack or a warrior attack in this game, is also enhanced. Your teammate will come out, knock him into the air, and then you'll do a special move that you only get while doing a support attack. Disappointingly, there aren't really any special moves between certain characters that know each other really well, so it's going to be the same for all the characters, but it does do more damage, and it is kind of fun watching two characters work together that normally don't. As you can imagine, there's also a few holdovers from Hyrule Warriors, the first being the crest system. So after beating areas, you get item drops, and you also get a form of currency. In this game it's gold, and you can spend that on getting new moves or enhancements to characters that you enjoy playing as. This system gets really important in the end game, especially if you're playing on the harder modes. We also got the return of the critical meter, so if you wail on an enemy that has a health bar, eventually a little shield gauge will deplete, and you will be able to deal some kind of massive attack on them that deals probably your most damaging move. And if you're hitting the enemy with their weakness, then that gauge will be yellow and go down even faster. So the main mode you'll be playing is story mode, and the story in this game is... actually, it's kind of bad. It's really not a good story mode. I'm sure people will be able to glean some enjoyment out of it. I certainly don't think it was like the worst story ever, but it's just not that interesting. It's really not that fun to follow. It's predictable, the main characters are really bland. In my opinion, they really don't do enough with the Fire Emblems franchise here. Like, they barely even talk to each other. I honestly don't think that the Fire Emblem characters really acknowledge each other's existence until, like, one brief section really late into the game. Like, there's this part in the story where you run into Corrin, Ryoma, and Xander, and they're under mind control, so your characters know how mind control works, they beat them out of their mind control, and then they return to normal. And then later on, you get separated from the friend that's been following this entire game, and when you meet him again, he's acting really evil and out of character, and nobody knows what's going on. Oh god, he's evil, he's been a traitor this entire time, and he was just luring us into a trap. That's gotta be it. Only possibility, there are zero other explanations for what could be happening right now. And then there's some stuff with your mom and the Fire Emblem oh god, it's just... really don't pay attention to the story at all. It's just an excuse for you to play through the game as your favorite Fire Emblem characters, so don't treat it as anything more. The tactics in the story mode are a bit shallow as well. Alright, I'm going to teach you how to get through the entire story mode, alright? You get 4 characters to work with. For your swordsman, you're going to take one of the main characters because they get the best weapon in the game. You're going to need to take somebody with an axe, so likely Camila, because she also has the benefit of being able to fly. I think there was another reason that guys really liked her, but I can't really remember what it is right now. You're going to need somebody with a lance. Likely, again, you're going to take a flyer, because not only are they super fast, but they can travel across gaps that nobody else in the game can travel across. Likely Cordelia, because you get her so early in the game. You could go Hinoka instead if you're just really, really into Hinoka for some reason. They are essentially the exact same characters, so don't stress about it too much. Your 4th spot should be a bow user because they insta-kill flyers. Personally, I went with Ryoma because I think he's really cool, but honestly, a bow user or a healer would be more beneficial. And that's it, congratulations, you just beat Fire Emblem Warriors. The problem we have here is that one of the game's greatest strengths also acts as one of its greatest weaknesses. Because of the weapon triangle, if you want to efficiently beat the game, you have to have one character of each, so you are going to choose the best characters for that role. It's kind of like how in Mario Rabbids Kingdom Battle, you pretty much always chose Luigi and then always chose some kind of healer, either Peach or Rabbid Luigi. The weapon triangle isn't present in other Warriors games, so most of the time you just choose the characters that appeal to you, whether it be aesthetically, or whether you like their weapons, or whether it's just a character you have as a really high level. In the story mode, there is a slight remedy to this. In addition to the 4 characters that you actually play the game as, you also have 4 character slots for just any characters you want to, and they can act as supports, they can defend your forts for you, they can heal for you, they can do a lot of stuff for you, but you'll never get to play as them. You can fill these 4 slots with your favorite characters if you want to, but you'll just have to accept that you don't actually get to play as them, which is a turnoff for some people. And don't think of switching it around and having the weapon triangle people be in the back and then just playing as your 4 favorite characters. It's not going to work, because if you do send them to attack an enemy general, then they're not going to beat them very quickly. It's pretty much just going to be a stalemate for like 5 minutes, and maybe eventually at some point they'll knock the enemy's health down to 0, but it's more about exerting influence than it is actually killing the enemy generals. So if you want to get some stuff done, you've got to play as the characters yourselves. While we're already sort of in the negatives, can we talk about graphics for a second? Not about the Switch version, okay? The Switch version looks fine. Yeah, it's not the greatest looking game, like pretty much any anime game on the PS4 is going to look better than this, but for what it is, it looks pretty good and it runs at a pretty consistent frame rate. But then we get to the abomination known as the 3DS port. Oh, mercy on your soul if this is how you had to experience Fire Emblem Warriors. Now, I know all of the arguments you're ready to make, so let me save you a comment. Yes, I know that because it's on the 3DS rather than the Switch, the graphics quality is going to be a bit more lackluster, shall we say. I know that the game is cheaper because it's on the 3DS, but it looks so much worse, and from what I've seen, it doesn't run anywhere near as well as the Switch version. You look at the pixelization on some of those weapons, this is, it hurts. I can't look at it. The edges, they're so jaggy, it's actually hurting my eyes. Now, this was Hyrule Warriors for the 3DS. Is it a little janky? Is it not as good as the Wii U version? Yeah, it's a little janky. Yeah, it's not as good as the Wii U version, of course, but that looks playable. That looks acceptable. I could take that. But then we go back here to a side-by-side comparison of the graphics on the Switch and the 3DS versions of Fire Emblem Warriors, and I don't know, it's just, there's just something so wrong looking about the 3DS version. The difference is night and day. Pay the extra money, get the Switch version. There is no reason anybody should have to suffer through the 3DS version of this game. So after you beat the story mode of Fire Emblem Warriors, you'll get into the actual game part, which is the history mode. In history mode, you'll go back and you'll replay some of the famous events from the past Fire Emblem games, but you'll do them, of course, with the Warriors gameplay, and there will be some neat little challenges and twists for you to do along the way. I was a little disappointed here too. I just really wish they'd used the Fire Emblem aesthetic better. Like, this would have been the perfect place to put a few maybe what-if scenarios, maybe put Chrom in the world of the original Fire Emblem so that Chrom could help Marth out and they could maybe communicate a little bit. The fact that there's not very much banter between the characters really bothers me. I know it seems like I'm going really harsh on this, but it just feels like with something like this, where the series is built so strongly on character interactions and characters building bonds with each other, that the fact that they don't really interact with each other very much is just really disheartening. Like, yeah, it's cool going back and playing some of the old Fire Emblem missions where you can go through boss rushes and there's special challenges and stuff waiting for you, but it's just missing something without that extra piece of fan service, you know? If I remember correctly, there was one history mission where you actually did play as multiple Fire Emblem characters working together, and that is kind of cool, I guess, but it's just not enough, and it's so late into the game. I think it took me 10 to 11 hours to beat the story mode, and in that 10 to 11 hours, I was just so disappointed by the lack of stuff that getting that little taste of it there at the end wasn't really enough to satisfy me. But I don't want to be a negative Nancy. The history mode is, for what it is, a lot of fun. You go through, you do special missions with special restrictions and requirements. It's a great chance to play as some of the characters you didn't play as during the story mode, and even unlock more characters. History mode is where the game really shines. That's all I'm gonna say. You can also get more history missions by doing special requirements during the story missions to unlock these Anna memoirs, and they unlock bigger and better history missions for you to do. Just as a pro tip, it's always beat 1,000 enemies on a stage. That is the Anna requirement. You never have to read about what to do. It's just beat up 1,000 enemies, go get it, and that's that. History mode, definitely worth your time. I think if you are going to invest a lot of time into the game, history mode is what you mainly want to be playing. Maybe rush through the story mode as quickly as you can on normal or something and get as many of Anna's memoirs as you can so that you can just dedicate all your time to history mode, because that's where the fun is. This sort of brings us into the really awkward conversation that I think we have to have. Is Fire Emblem Warriors better than Hyrule Warriors? To preface this, I'm a huge fan of both series, but I do like Fire Emblem way more than I like Zelda. Like, way more, it's not even a contest. The problem we hit here is Zelda, even though the cast is smaller, has such a nice diversity among characters. There's characters that do crazy things in Hyrule Warriors that just can't happen in Fire Emblem Warriors. In Fire Emblem, it's pretty much a guy or a girl with a weapon. What makes the Fire Emblem franchise so good is the strong characters, the interesting story elements, and how fun the tactical stuff is. And a lot of that's missing in Fire Emblem Warriors, so Hyrule Warriors wins out for me because it had a way better chance to shine. I mean, bruh, you had Fierce Daddy Link bringing down the moon and cutting it in half. You had Marin, who fought with a giant bell. Midna, who through some amazing fan service can ride on a wolf so it feels like you're playing Twilight Princess. Agatha literally fights with butterflies. Linkle, man, it's adorable. Dual-wielded crossbows, fun character to watch and play as. Now, credit where credit is due. There are some unique gameplay aspects to some of the characters in Fire Emblem Warriors. One of my favorites, of course, being Tiki. I can't help it, guys, okay? The lolly dragons, they're just too powerful. They're adorable, and they make everything better. So the way Tiki works is she's weak against every single enemy type on the board, but when you get enough special, she can turn into her big dragon form and just completely dominate the entire field. So you start out really weak, you can't really take any forts, and you're just building this meter, and then when you finally get that meter built, you're just taking fort after fort and flying across the map, and it's awesome. When you charge into enemies as Frederick, then you will literally drag them across the map with you. That's always fun. And see, there are these little differences between all the different characters, but really what you're going to be paying attention to is the weapon triangle. Even though it is a great addition, in theory, it does hurt the playability of some characters. There are only so many ways you can make 50 characters that mainly adhere to 3 different weapon types that unique from one another, and it shows. I want to reiterate that this isn't necessarily a problem with how they made this game, it's just sort of the downside of Fire Emblem as a base for a Fire Emblem Warriors game. The Zelda universe is just a bit more aesthetically pleasing than Fire Emblem. The thing that makes Fire Emblem so strong are the character interactions and the character development, and because that doesn't shine through here, the game suffers a little bit for it. It's not a bad game, they just could have done so much more with it. I mean, come on. In Hyrule Warriors, there's literally a weapon you can give Link that lets you play as the Great Fairy holding Link in like a little bottle. So interesting, so unique. The last thing I want to talk about, because I know somebody's going to bring it up, is yes, there is technically support conversations. The reason I didn't really talk about them is you only get 1 support conversation per pair, and you don't get them until you absolutely max out their support gauge. And it's fine, they're really well done. The character support conversations are about 2 to 3 minutes long. They're all fully voiced. You get them for every single pair in the game as far as I know. And some of them are really interesting to listen to. It's just not enough. It's too little too late. More of this should have been moved over to the story mode and the history mode so that we can enjoy this in small pieces as we're playing the game, in my opinion. Now, we've been talking forever, let's start wrapping this thing up. So, is this game worth it? It's really hard to say, to be honest. But here's my personal opinion. If you haven't played very much of the Warriors franchise and you are very into Fire Emblem, I give this game its full worth it price of $60. You are going to get hundreds of hours of gameplay out of this game if you really want it. 50 characters to level up, DLC characters, you've got to get everybody's supports maxed out so you can see all the support conversations. When you beat the game on hard mode, you unlock Lunatic mode, which you can use to get even more Animemoirs, which you can unlock even more history modes with. If you're not already fatigued from playing other Warriors games, I think you are really going to enjoy this game, and I highly recommend you go and pick it out for its full price. Now, if you're a Fire Emblem fan and you've played a bunch of Warriors games, I think this game is worth about $40. You're probably going to have a bit of fun with it, but eventually that Warriors fatigue is going to set in a little bit, and I think you're going to stop at some point, probably after you've maxed out the levels of your favorite characters, and maybe after you've beaten the story mode on its hardest difficulty. You're probably not going to get more than, say, 30 to 40-ish hours out of this game, but I think for $40 it's definitely worth it. If you're really into the Warriors franchise, but not so much into Fire Emblem, and you want to use this as a way to sort of see what Fire Emblem brought to the table, and maybe check out some of the Fire Emblem universe, I think I'd give this game about $30. The stuff that Fire Emblem brings is really unique, and I think it is worth picking up at some point, especially if you have a Switch. But I do think you're going to get bored very quickly, and you're eventually just going to move back on to another Warriors game entirely. And to be honest, I don't think it's the best representation of the Fire Emblem universe. There's just not enough Fire Emblem for me to recommend it as a Fire Emblem game. But I think that about wraps it up for today. If you enjoyed the video, please leave it a like. Those things really do help me out. I have a feeling some of you have some stuff you want to say to me in the comments, so go ahead and fire them away. And finally, subscribe to stay up to date on the latest Kudo news. And before you leave that comment about how this is the greatest game ever made and how you're going to play it for days, weeks, and years to come, so everybody should run out and buy it for full price right now, quick reminder, Mario Odyssey this weekend. Mario Odyssey this weekend. Can we at least be honest with ourselves and admit that Mario Odyssey is going to be a much bigger deal than this game for the time being, and that people can wait for a price drop on this game and play Mario Odyssey in the meantime? Feel like I found our compromise. Also, if you made it this far into the video, leave the name of a Fire Emblem character in your comment so that I know. Take care!